Well, hello. This is Andrew Filmer speaking from Penang in Malaysia, speaking with Donald Morris, who's there in Wellington. How are you doing, Donald?
Very well, thanks, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Yes. And we're here to make a short video for the ANZVS for the purposes of kind of looking back at the Congress, the 44th International Viola Congress, which was held in Wellington in 2017. So, Donald, I think we have an interesting story about how uh, the Congress even came to Wellington to begin with this second time. Could you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So a few years ago, I did a few projects in Poland, in Poznan, with Marcin Mirowski, and he was terrific in setting up recordings for CD and for making a film. And I wanted to thank Marcin, by reciprocating and inviting him to New Zealand to come and do a kind of a little mini congress, if you like, an Australasian one, just Australia, New Zealand, and feature Marcin in that little mini congress. And that was progressing well. I had my assistant Elise Delabacus was helping me to prepare the way for that. We were quite well along the way when I got a call from Carlos, the president of the International Viola Society, saying, "Oh, I understand you're organising a kind of local congress over there. How would you feel about upgrading it, supersizing it to an international one? Because the host who we thought was going to do it isn't going to do it." This must have been, I guess, the year before, or it was probably about 6 or 8 months before actually it was due to happen. So suddenly Elise and I had to make this decision. Are we prepared to take this on to upgrade from an Australasian one to an international one? So it was a fairly big decision because a lot of differences between a local one and a big one, logistically, financially, and so on. So we had to suddenly think a lot more differently. And we decided, yes, why not? Let's do it. And so it kind of happened by accident in a way. We still managed to feature Marcin in it. He played a concerto with the Congress Orchestra, conducted the orchestra of violists, and did master classes. So he was still well featured in the Congress, but it grew to something much bigger.
I have pictures of both of them. So we can see here Elise over here,
Yep,
who I mean was the engine of day-to-day affairs. Well, you
yep.
took over the larger picture of making sure the Congress ran. She made sure every room was correctly booked and people were going in the right direction and the food was arriving in the right places. And Martin over here on the right, I think giving one of the lectures during the Congress itself over here. Can I? I think we were hoping to get Elise here, but she's unavailable. Her birthday was just a couple of days ago, and you mentioned something that I think only insiders would know when you wished her happy birthday, and that's I'm something about being difficult. So maybe you can tell this story.
Well, one of the catchphrases of Elise during the Congress was that she could be quite, what shall we say, strong in how things should run. And sometimes we wouldn't entirely agree. And she would just say to me, "Son, look, I'm only difficult because I care." And this became a kind of a catchphrase as we led up to the Congress. And so we had in the final dinner, we presented her with a T-shirt which said, "I'm only difficult because I care." So we've sort of had this ongoing joke ever since. And so when I wished her happy birthday, I said, "You're only difficult because you care."
And I think the connection to Marcin over here was from, if I recall correctly, you were at the Congress, the previous Congress that was in Poland, the 41st, if I'm not mistaken, Congress that was in Poland, and you extended your trip to collaborate with him, and it was a remarkable collaboration. You have done quite a few things with him since then as well.
Yeah, so the Congress back in, I think it was, I can't remember the year now, when it was in Poznan, not in Poznan, in Krakow.
Hmm.
And we met there and we knew each other from several years earlier, but we did together a concert for the New Zealand Embassy in Warsaw on that visit. And that was our first real playing collaboration. We played Polish and New Zealand music together. And flowing on from that became several visits by me to Poland, but Marcin had never been to New Zealand. So that's how it all began way back then.
Let's move on to the Congress itself. I was taken about how important it was to actually have cultural elements that showed this was a real New Zealand Congress, not just a Congress that happened to be in New Zealand. Could you talk a little bit about the kind of pictures that we're looking at over here?
Yes. So one of the things I wanted to do was to begin the Congress with a porphyry, which is like a Maori greeting, a traditional Maori greeting from that history where one tribe would be visiting another one. There would always be this quite formal kind of welcome ceremony, usually involved a bit of spear waving and chanting, because the visiting party had to declare whether they came there as in war or as friends.
Mm.
So there's quite a lot of kind of protocol around this. And I thought it would be nice for these visitors to New Zealand to experience this traditional kind of Maori welcome. And so you'll see there the picture with Anna Sarova and the Maori chief and myself there. After we'd gone through the kind of declaring that we'd come in friendship and not in war.
Mm.
And it was a great occasion. We actually had this fellow here who you can see actually taught us the haka.
Mm.
So he actually had a group of violists who learned how to do that traditional haka. And it was really a wonderful occasion.
Yes. So this was actually the second time that the Congress came to New Zealand. You've hosted it once before. Could you talk a little bit about what is it like hosting it for a second time? I think there's only one place that's done that, and that's I think that's the Eastman School in the United States that's actually hosted it twice.
Yeah, well, certainly there's a big difference first time and second time. The first time it happened was also kind of by default. I was actually at the Congress I'm just trying to think, in Sweden, I think, in the year 2000. And I was kind of a newcomer then to Congresses. I'd been to a few, but I'd never played any significant role. But I was at the Congress and I knew they were planning for the following year in 2001. And while I was there, they made the announcement that whoever was supposed to host it couldn't do it. And I just had a quiet word to David Dalton, who was one of the powers in control at that time. And I said, would you consider holding a Congress in New Zealand? And he looked at me like I was from Mars. He said, you've got to be joking. The Congresses are always in North America or Europe. How can we conceive of going to the bottom of the world? And he said, let me think about it. And he said, well, you'd have to come up with a very strong proposal, how you're going to make it work financially, logistically, and so on. But he gave me that opportunity. I came back to New Zealand and I went to my employer at the time was Massey University. And I said, look, here's this opportunity to host this really significant international event. You're going to have to stump up quite a lot of money to make sure that I don't fall over doing it. I'll need financial backing, but it will bring great exposure to the university. And they considered and they came back and said, yes, we'd like to do this. It coincided with them moving into a magnificent building in Wellington, which used to be the National Museum. It was known as the Dominion Museum. The museum had in the meantime moved downtown and the old building was being done up. So it was a major exercise, earthquake proofing it and so on. So the International Viola Congress in 2001 was the very first event to happen in that building after it had been repaired, which was really amazing. One little anecdote I remember, the day before the Congress was due to open, I went out the front and the road was still a mess of machinery and gravel. And I just threw my hands up and said, we've got this major event opening here tomorrow. How can we do this with this road and this mess? And they said, don't worry, tomorrow morning the road will be sealed, the gutters will be in, it will be finished. And sure enough, I came the next morning and there was this brand new road with new gutters. Everything was absolutely ready to go. Concrete was hard, but it was right down to the last hour or two.
Did it really help you in organizing it a second time?
Yeah, absolutely. Many things that are a fast learning curve when you're organising a viola congress, because you don't really know anything. You don't know how things work. I mean, you're dealing with helping people with international travel. I seem to remember there were 150 people coming to New Zealand, and I was negotiating with each of them to help them with many governments. I was writing to governments around the world, asking them to sponsor their musicians to come. I'd never done anything like that before. So there are a lot of kind of things I learned on the run, so to speak. But it was really valuable experience. So the second time around, I knew straight away, oh, these are the things that are going to happen. And I could hit the ground running, knowing exactly what I was in for. I knew what financial backing I needed before I started. I knew the logistics of getting people into the country, the accommodation, the catering, all of that stuff had all been done before. So I could actually just pass on that information to people like Elise and say, here it is, make it happen, this is what you've got to do. So no question, second time around was much easier for me, not for her.
You mentioned Anna Serova before, so let's bring up a picture of her here dancing the tango, which I think must be the one and only time that a viola soloist decides to put down her instrument and actually dance on a stage. I would be surprised if it ever happens again. So
It will happen again with her, but probably not with anybody else.
right, and I think this was a partner, a dancing partner that she got when she arrived in Wellington, if I'm not mistaken. Right, it was
Yes,
arranged that she would dance a tango with someone she hadn't met before.
exactly. So the story behind Anna Serova coming is quite interesting, because we can wind back a few years. About a decade ago, more than a decade ago, I made a recording of Boris Pigovat's Holocaust Requiem, and that was the only recording that existed for many years. And then Anna Serova made a new recording of it, along with another work that had been written for her. And so when I became aware of this, we began communicating with each other. It was just really interesting to talk to someone else who'd gone through the process of learning and playing that piece. And I just communicated and I said, Anna, what about coming to Wellington to the Congress and being one of our stars and performing with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra? I didn't ask her to play the Holocaust Requiem, it's too long, but I said, perhaps you've got another work. And she said, yes, she would perform the new work that Boris had written for her with the orchestra. And another work she wanted to perform was called Lady Walton's Garden, written by her partner, Roberto Molinelli. And so in this piece he wrote for her, as we see here, at the very end of the work, she puts down the viola. Well, actually, she's still playing, and the male tango dancer walks onto the stage and makes gestures to her like, put down your viola and dance with me. So she finishes her phrase, puts the viola down on the chair, and then joins the dancer to do the tango. It's a beautiful ending to the piece. It takes the audience totally by surprise because, as you say, we don't think it's been done before. I know she's performed it since, and I'm sure she will many times again, but whether another person can step into those shoes is another matter.
Yes, and it was quite an unusual finale concerts to actually have three violists come in and to play three very different works. You've got Anna Serova, as you mentioned, playing two different fairly new works. Then you've got Roger Myers from the US coming in to play an orchestrated version of a chamber music piece, the Märchenbilder by Schumann. And then you had Roger Benedict also there playing a staple of viola repertoire, the Walton Viola Concerto. Did you already conceive of this finale concert being of three people with this kind of range of repertoire, or is it something which sort of came together by happy happenstance?
It kind of evolved. I knew I wanted the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra to be involved in a gala concert, and I knew I wanted Anna Serova to be one of the soloists. Yes, I did want it to be a whole concert of viola solos. So what we were going to have them perform is another question. I'd been in contact with Roger Myers about performing, and he told me about the recording he'd just made of the Schumann. I think it was with the London Symphony Orchestra, but it only existed in an audio recording. And I said, well, how about we do a live one, and it will be videoed so that we can share this arrangement. And with Roger Benedict, he's well known for his performances of the Walton Viola Concerto. And so it was kind of a no-brainer really to ask him to bring him over and to perform that work to end the concert. So the concert sort of evolved during the planning. And once I had the NZSO on board to be involved, it became very clear that would be the program. It happened pretty quickly.
And it ended with a work of four violas, which was really nice to let people who hadn't attended the Congress as a whole, hear how just violas by themselves can make wonderful music. And I think that's the principal violist of
that's Julia Joyce there got up and joined the three viola soloists to play at St. Piazzolla.
Yeah, so it's not only the three altos, but you ended off with a fourth alto as well. Yeah. Let me bring you back to the Congress, and apart from having these big stars in to have as a culmination of the event, what I really loved about it was that you had a lot of events that involved everybody. So anybody who came in, whether it's a student or an amateur, I love the picture on the left because it just shows what different generations there. If I'm not mistaken, is that your daughter in the background?
It is indeed my daughter Lucy in there, yes. In the back on the right there, yeah.
Right. And right in the middle, you've had a long-serving member of the ANZVS as president. Yes?
Not sure who that is. Is that
I think that's Anna, if I'm not mistaken.
Anna Brooker? Yes, I think you
Yeah.
might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've I think we had students of all ages, of the teenagers involved, and on the right hand side we actually had a get together in, if I'm not mistaken, is it the museum, the Te Papa Museum?
Te Papa Museum, yes, that circle there is that circle of light is on the main floor of the museum. And so we had a flash mob performance of Pachelbel's Canon here, where of course we had it pre-organized, but the people in the museum didn't have any idea what was going on. So it began with me kind of wandering into the middle of that circle, just playing the bass line of Pachelbel Canon, and violas just started appearing from all directions until we had a very full muster. And the very final part, when we got down to the last 30 seconds, Marcin Morawski came on to conduct.
Right.
Of course, it was nearly over by the time he arrived, but it was magnificent. That was live streamed. It was a great way to promote the whole Congress.
There were other events here, representation from Sounds to let our international guests know a bit more about New Zealand music, New Zealand compositions, and quite an interesting exhibit of violas, as well as I think one of the most popular booths there was actually of rosin that was actually being sold as well. Could you talk about this aspect of the Congress, which I think doesn't get as much discussion, I feel, when we talk about events that happen at a Congress?
Yeah, it's traditional that a viola Congress will have a luthier's display, a luthier's room, and depending on accessibility to the Congress, that can be huge. If it's in the United States, it's always huge because people come from all over the US. And I was surprised actually at the number of exhibits we had, considering we were, far away from everywhere. We had Australian people were bringing instruments over, certainly from around New Zealand. I think some came even from the US, from recollection, but of course they were limited how many instruments they could bring. But it's a tradition to have this room open at all times during the Congress, and people can come and try out violas. And usually we have somebody will do a kind of a demonstration, a public demonstration on a wide selection of them. And we often find people will purchase an instrument at a Congress. And I know that happened at this Congress. There were several instruments purchased by people.
Finally, we have other friends of yours who played big roles over here. On this, this was an interesting picture I found from the collection that you sent me, simply because I think it's Hannah over there who looked like she was actually just going to be a page turner. And this is the moment where we realize that she picks up, she's a percussionist, so I think she picks up maracas or something like that, and joins in the end of this performance.
Yeah, so this is the Baccarini Quintet for guitar and string quartet, and the string quartet is from Brigham Young University in Utah. That's my good friend and colleague Claudine Bigelow, you'll see over on the right there, playing the viola, and her colleagues that she brought. And it's Jane Curry playing the guitar, who lives locally here in Wellington. So this was a beautiful collaboration with visiting musicians, with a local performer. And Hannah, as you say, this piece is normally not done with maracas or castanets, whatever it is, I can't remember now. But she said, "Oh look, I'll do the castanet part, and I'll just sit there pretending I'm the page turner until the moment when I have to actually pull it out and join in the performance." So it's not usually done with that percussion, but it added a really rich element to it to have it there.
Looking back at the Congress now, what thoughts do you have about about the entire Congress, and also would you ever host it again and be the only person in history hosting a Congress for 3? I mean, if you want to break some break some barriers, there you go.
I think if I said I was hosting a third Congress, I would be divorced. It does take its toll on home life because, in the weeks leading up to it, it gets really intense. And during the time it's on, you may as well not be at home at all because you just have to be everywhere at once. So I would be involved in a kind of organising committee possibly, but I wouldn't want to take on the role of full host again. It's just a bit too much at my ripe old age.
Now, what thoughts do you have looking back at the Congress that was held?
Well, all very positive. I mean, I was really happy with the outcome. There seemed to be a lot of happy faces at the end. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm just really grateful that we didn't get struck down by COVID or something like that, because I can imagine how horrendous it would be to be almost into a Congress and have something like that happen. We live in a world now where for several years Congresses are going to be difficult to kind of guarantee that they'll actually go ahead or that they'll go according to the way you planned them. I plan to go to the one in Columbus, Georgia next year, but you know, anything can happen in this strange world. So I'm really thankful that it happened at a time when we didn't have those kind of obstacles.
To end off our conversation, can I bring up your new fascination? Well, not so new now. You've had it for quite a few years now, and I love how this looks like it's your tie, but it's not, and you can see how many strings you have to deal with over here, and that's the viola d'amore. That's something that I think after was it after the Picovat Holocaust Requiem that you took up a bit more seriously, even though I know from my time studying with you that it was hanging in your house for many years before that.
Yeah, so someone had actually given me a viola d'amore about 20 years earlier, and I hadn't had time to do anything other than shove it under the bed or hang it on the wall. Too busy being a viola player. But I think when I was in my early 60s, I decided this is the time. I've done most of the things I wanted to do on viola. This is the time to actually find out what this instrument's all about. So I played on the one I'd been given for a while, but then I bought another one which was easier to play, a more refined instrument. And then I set about arranging concert tours to feature this instrument. I went twice to Southeast Asia and tour in Poland and various places in New Zealand and Australia, and eventually made 2 CDs with this instrument. But the crowning glory really was to go to Poznan and make the film with Marcin Murawski on the composer Krzysztof Graupner. And on that film I perform 4 of his concertos. And it's a documentary film which talks about the instrument and talks about Graupner. So since then I've been doing less. I've been kind of moving back to more viola playing, actually. So I do have a tour in New Zealand next year featuring the viola d'amore for Chamber Music New Zealand. So it's about 10 concerts in that tour. So that'll keep me busy in retirement.
In retirement.
Retirement.
Indeed. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Donald. Congratulations on your appointment as Professor Emeritus, Victoria University. And we look forward to, if not as host, seeing you at many more viola congresses in the future.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Take care.
Bye.